Right now, somewhere near you, there is a bird standing on a ledge. It is fat. It is fearless. It does not fly away when you walk past. There are millions of them in your city alone. And yet, you have never once thought about eating one, not even as a joke. That's strange if you stop and think about it, because for most of human history, that exact bird was dinner. Kings ate it, farmers raised it, cookbooks were written about it. Then, in the span of about 50 years, it flipped. The same animal that once sat on fine china became something you'd step over on the sidewalk. Most people assume it's because the bird is dirty, diseased, unsafe to eat. That's not quite right. The real reason is stranger, and it says a lot more about you than it does about the pigeon. This is the story of how an entire species got erased from the menu, not by science, but by marketing, class, and fear. And by the end, you'll never look at a park bench pigeon the same way again. Let's go back further than you'd expect. Not decades, thousands of years. Ancient Egyptians kept pigeons in dovecotes along the Nile. They used them as messengers, but they also ate them constantly. The Romans did the same. So did the Greeks, the Chinese, and medieval Europeans. In the Middle Ages, owning a dovecote wasn't just practical. It was a status symbol, like owning a car today. A full dovecote meant a family could eat fresh meat through the entire winter, when almost nothing else was available. Pigeons breed fast, live on almost nothing, and need no pasture. For a poor farmer, that made them one of the most efficient meat sources on the planet. So picture it. You're a peasant in the year 1300. Snow is on the ground. The harvest is long gone. But up in that little stone tower, there's a fresh meal waiting any day you need it. That's not a delicacy. That's survival. This tradition didn't stay in the past either. It crossed the ocean. By 1900, pigeon, sold under the name squab, was showing up on the fanciest menus in America. Delmonico's in New York served it. So did the Palmer House in Chicago. Classic cookbooks of the era included multiple recipes for it, right alongside beef and duck. So here's the question. If pigeon was fine dining in 1900, what happened in the next 50 years? But here's what's fascinating. Part of the answer isn't about pigeons at all. It's about a completely different bird. In 1900, chickens weren't really raised for meat. They were kept mostly for eggs. Only the old, tired hens that stopped laying ended up in a pot. Then the poultry industry had an idea. Breed chickens specifically to grow fast and cheap, and sell the meat as the modern, clean, all-American choice. It worked. By 1950, chicken cost about half of what it did in 1900. Squab, on the other hand, stayed expensive. Pigeons only lay 2 eggs at a time, and it takes about a month to raise a squab to size. There's no shortcut. You can't mass produce them the way you can a chicken, so while chicken kept getting cheaper and more available, pigeon stayed a slow, small batch product. And that timing lines up with something else, something much darker. And it might be the strangest part of all. In 1914, a bird named Martha died in a zoo in Cincinnati. She was the last passenger pigeon on Earth. Just a century earlier, passenger pigeons were so numerous that a single migrating flock could block out the sun for hours. Early settlers hunted them by the millions, shot them out of the sky, and pulled the babies straight from the nests to eat. It seemed like an endless resource. It wasn't. Overhunting and deforestation wiped out billions of birds in just a few generations. When the very last one died, something shifted in the public imagination. The wild pigeon, once a symbol of overwhelming abundance, became a symbol of guilt. And the birds that were left, the ones nesting on ledges and rooftops instead of forests, slowly stopped being seen as food. They started being seen as something else entirely. A pest. So what killed the family dinner version of the bird for good? Class did. As squab became rarer and pricier, it became associated with a very specific group. Immigrant communities who kept cooking it the way their grandparents had. Italian and Chinese restaurants kept serving it, long after it dropped off most American tables. And, in the era's ugly social hierarchy, food eaten by working-class immigrants was treated as lesser, even dirty, by wealthier white Americans trying to distance themselves. Then came the Great Depression. Money was tight everywhere. Squab needed dedicated farming, feed, and care. Chicken was already cheaper and getting cheaper by the year. When people had to choose, they chose the bird that cost less and carried no stigma. Within about 50 years, pigeon went from a $2 special at a five-star restaurant to something nobody's grandmother would admit to serving. The bird didn't change. The story around the bird did. But that's only half the story. Here's the twist that changes everything. You'd assume the reason we don't eat park pigeons is disease. Most people would bet on that in a heartbeat. It's actually mostly a myth. Wild pigeons don't carry dramatically more sickness than any other city bird, including the chickens on your dinner plate. The real danger isn't the bird's biology at all, it's the bird's diet. A farmed squab eats clean grain in a controlled coop, the same way a farmed chicken does. A street pigeon eats whatever a city gives it. Cigarette butts, discarded fast food. Whatever chemical residue is sitting on a sidewalk. Over months and years, that diet can build up heavy metals and toxins in the bird's tissue. So the danger was never pigeon, it was this specific pigeon eating this specific garbage in this specific gutter. Swap the diet and you swap the animal entirely, which is exactly what still happens right now in kitchens you'd never expect. And here's where it gets almost funny. While American diners were quietly canceling squab from the menu, the rest of the world never stopped. In France, pigeon is still considered a refined upscale dish, served in some of the country's best restaurants. In parts of China and across Morocco, pigeon is a celebration food, saved for special occasions and honored guests. Farmers today still raise domesticated squab specifically for the table, the exact same practice that fed medieval peasants through the winter. So the bird never actually became unsafe. It never actually became inedible. It simply became unfashionable in one country for reasons that had almost nothing to do with the animal itself. Now, zoom out, because this isn't really a story about a bird. It's a story about you and about disgust. You didn't decide on your own using logic and evidence that pigeon is inedible. That decision was made for you decades before you were born by marketing budgets, class prejudice, and a food industry chasing profit. And you inherited it without ever questioning it, which raises an uncomfortable question. What else do you find disgusting, not because it's actually dangerous, but because someone, somewhere, decided it should be? Every culture has its own invisible list like this. Insects, organ meat, horse, dog, snails. Somewhere on Earth right now, someone is eating something you'd never touch and enjoying it as much as you enjoy a burger. Meanwhile, that same person might be horrified by something on your plate. Disgust feels like instinct. It feels like biology. But most of the time, it's just a story, repeated so many times that it starts to feel like fact. The pigeon on that ledge hasn't changed in 100 years. You have. And the story you were handed changed you without you ever noticing.